Have you ever felt watched, then tried to convince yourself you were being dramatic? You're on a channel where we break down real stories from 4chan, shared by people who couldn't just forget what happened. What follows has that slow pressure, like something is getting closer without making a sound. Sit back, soften the lights, and hit the bell. Let's get into it. Day 3 of the search, and by then, we all knew what the odds looked like. Guys don't tell you this out loud, but you can read it in how they load the packs. On day 1, you bring extra medical, extra warmers, a full spinal board. By day 3, you're mostly bringing a bag for what you find. The climber's name was Wes, 28, solo trip, summit push on North Sister. He'd checked in with his sister Sunday morning from the trailhead. That was the last time anyone heard his voice. His truck was still parked at Pole Creek when the ranger swung by on Monday afternoon. Driver's door unlocked, an empty coffee cup in the console. I flew as the spotter. Our pilot was a guy everybody called Rook, ex-Army. Calm the way old-school pilots are calm. The kind who lands a bird in a whiteout without changing his tone on the radio. We'd been flying together for 2 seasons in the Cascades, and I trusted him more than I trusted my own eyes, which turned out to matter. Weather that Tuesday was the kind of thing that looks fine from the parking lot and turns into a problem the second you gain altitude. Broken cloud around 8,000 feet, wind picking up out of the west, temperature dropping steady. We had a window of maybe 4 hours before the front rolled in and grounded everyone. Grid patterns. That's how you do it. You take a slice of the map, you fly it, you cross it off, you take the next one. The first sweeps had covered the trail corridor and the standard descent routes. Wes wasn't on any of them. So by Tuesday we were flying the harder terrain. Ledges, chutes, the kind of places you fall into when a decision goes wrong up high. I had the binoculars up almost the whole time. Your eyes get tired fast in that light. The snow throws everything back at you, and after an hour the shadows all start looking like packs and helmets and boots. You learn to ignore 90% of what you see, because 90% of it is nothing. The first orange came up around 11:30, west-facing ledge, about 7,200 feet by my read, tucked under a lip of rock that would have hidden it from anything but our angle. A clean, bright square of orange against wet gray stone. Got something, I said into the intercom. 2 o'clock, mid-slope, above that dark band. Rook banked without asking twice. That's the deal. You call it, he flies it. We came around on a slow approach, giving me time to keep eyes on the spot. I watched it the whole way in, never looked away. I want to be clear about that. I never once looked away from that ledge. We got in close, maybe 40 yards off, at an angle where I should have been able to see the weave on the fabric, and the ledge was empty, just wet rock and a smear of old snow. I didn't say anything for a second. Rook did a slow pass, then a second slower one, holding us in the lee of the ridge where the wind wasn't shaking us around. Nothing. No pack, no jacket, no body, no smear of color anywhere on that face. Trick of the light, I said finally. My voice sounded thin in the headset. Copy, Rook said. That was all. We climbed back out and went back to the grid. I took a long drink of water and shook my head hard, like a dog. I'd been staring too long. It happens. Guys on our team talk about it. The way after a certain number of hours, everything starts to want to be a person. Rocks become boots. Branches become arms. You blink hard and it goes away. We flew for another 40 minutes. I logged one avalanche path that looked recent, radioed it down for the ground teams. Nothing else. The cloud ceiling was pushing lower. Rook mentioned we might have less time than we thought. The second orange came up on the other side of the drainage. Different slope, different aspect. Northeast face this time, higher, maybe 7,800 feet, in a little bench above a broken cliff band. Same color, same size, same clean square of it against the rock. I didn't call it right away. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds through the glass, waiting for it to become a rock or a patch of lichen or my own retinas playing back the last one. It didn't. It stayed a jacket. Rook, I said, I've got another one. 10 o'clock, above the cliff band. I know how this sounds. Show me. He brought us around. Same drill. Slow, careful, giving me the whole approach to keep the spot locked in. And I did, same as before. I did not look away. I watched that jacket sit on that ledge the whole way in, empty. Rook held us there in a hover for a long time, longer than he should have given the wind. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at the rock. "You saw it," I said. "I saw something orange," he said. "Yeah." We didn't talk much after that. My hands were cold, in a way they hadn't been 10 minutes before. The sound of the rotors changed pitch as Rook eased us back out into the drainage, that low bass note you get when the blades are working harder in thin air. Inside the cabin, there was that smell I don't have a good word for. Sweat and hydraulic fluid and the plastic of the intercom foam pressed against my face. Back on the grid. My eyes were shot by then. Every stripe of lichen wanted to be a sleeve. I made myself scan slower, left to right, top to bottom. No jumping, no chasing shapes. I drank more water than I needed to just to have something to do with my hands. An hour later, give or take, I saw it a third time, southwest face, below both of the other spots. Almost down at the tree line, on a shelf you couldn't reach on foot without a rope and a good reason. Same orange, sitting there like it had been sitting there all week. I didn't say anything at first. I lowered the binoculars. I looked at Rook. He was already looking at that side of the ridge. "I see it too," he said, going. He didn't say anything else. He didn't ask me to confirm. He didn't come at it slow. He put the nose down and we went, harder than either of the first two runs. And I remember the airframe shaking a little as we came into the ridge. Halfway in, my chest did that thing where it forgets to breathe. Because from that angle, closer than we'd been either of the other times, I could see the jacket had a shape inside it. A person shape, slumped, not moving. Rook found a place to put us down, about 60 yards below the shelf. I was out with the pack before the skids fully settled. The wind on the ground was worse than it had felt in the air, coming off the snowfield above in cold, hard shoves. My boots kept slipping on wet scree and catching, slipping and catching, all the way up. He was on his side, orange shell, one glove missing, the other hand tucked up under his chin, blue lips, skin the color of a bad bruise. I got 2 fingers under his jaw, and I felt a pulse, slow enough that I counted twice to be sure. "He's alive," I said into the radio. "Alive. Severe hypo. I need the bag up here now." Rook came up with the kit. Between us, we got him wrapped, got the warmers going, got fluids started. He didn't wake up for us. He didn't wake up on the flight down. He woke up 2 days later at St. Charles in Bend, and he was going to keep most of his fingers. His sister came out of the room and hugged both of us and cried into my jacket for a while. And I stood there and let her, and I didn't know what to say because I didn't have anything true to say that was going to help. Here's the part I keep coming back to. That jacket was Mountain Hardwear, high-vis orange, the exact color they make for exactly this reason. Bright against rock, bright against snow, bright against anything. He was on a shelf that was fully exposed from the west. We had flown the west side twice before we found him. Not close, but close enough that I should have seen him. I know I should have, because on the third pass I did see him, from further out than either of the 2 ghosts. I asked Rook about it on the drive back to the hangar that night. Not directly, just kind of circled around it. He drove for a while without answering, one hand on the wheel and the other on the shifter, the road going dark green in the headlights. Then he said, "Sometimes the mountain shows you." He said it the same way he says everything. No weight on it, no drama. I wrote the report that night in the office. I wrote that we located the subject on the 3rd pass of the west face at approximately 14:20 local, and I wrote the coordinates and the condition on arrival and the extraction time. I did not write about the first 2 passes. I've thought about that a lot since, whether I should have, whether leaving it out was a kind of lying. But I couldn't figure out how to put it in a form that wouldn't get me pulled off flight status. And Wes was in a bed in Bend keeping his fingers. And Rook wasn't going to say anything. And in the end, what was there to say? A jacket on a ledge. Twice. On ledges that were empty. Rook retired the next spring. I still fly. I still spot. I still call in orange when I see it. I just don't tell anyone anymore how many times I have to see it before I'm sure. The job came in through my portfolio site on a Tuesday in November, and for the first 3 weeks I honestly thought I'd caught a break. Portland had been slow all fall. 2 contracts pulled back to, let's revisit in Q1. One agency ghosted me after a discovery call, and my rent on the apartment off Division had gone up again in September. I was staring at a Figma file for a dog groomer in Beaverton when the email came in. Clean signature, real domain, referenced a specific case study from my site by name. That last part matters. Most cold outreach from real people references the wrong project or none at all. He signed his emails, Grant, said he was building a company called Northline Guarantee, described it as a policy administration platform, which I only half understood. But he was clear that the tech side was already handled, and what he needed was the full visual identity. Logo, type system, color, document templates, pitch deck, a landing page they'd build themselves off the style guide. Budget was $18,000, half up front. I did the checks I always do. LLC filed in Delaware, which is normal. Domain registered 8 months ago through a proxy, also normal. LinkedIn for him was thin but not empty. Some connections in insurance and ad tech in Chicago and Phoenix. He got on a Zoom call, and his background was a real office, not a stock blur. He knew what a type scale was. He knew what he wanted the brand to feel like. Said, conservative but not sleepy, and I understood exactly what he meant. The deposit hit my account inside of 2 days. Wire from a real bank in Delaware, matching name on the LLC. I started work the next Monday. For the first stretch, this was the best client I'd had all year. He answered emails inside of 2 hours. He gave feedback in specifics, not vibes. Move the counter on the A 2 points wider. That blue reads insurance blue, but not our insurance blue. Pull it towards slate. He knew what he was doing. He'd clearly hired people like me before. The signals came slow, and I want to be honest that at the time they didn't feel like signals. They felt like a client with strong taste. The first one was about the word mark. I delivered 3 directions in the second round. He circled one, a custom cut based on a modernized serif, and said, "This is close." Then he sent a reference image. It was a screenshot of another company's word mark, not identical to what I'd made, but you could see the family resemblance in the terminals of the letters. He said, "Can we push our version toward this feeling?" I asked who the reference was. He said it was a competitor they admired. I looked them up. It was one of the largest names in the space he was supposedly entering. Not a competitor, a giant. I pushed the word mark a little in that direction. Not a copy, just closer in energy. The kind of note clients give and designers accept 10 times a week. The second signal was color. He wanted a specific gradient in the secondary palette. Sent a hex code, not a vibe. When I checked it against the giant's public brand guidelines, which they publish for their partners, the hex was 1 point off on each channel, 3 digits shifted by a single value each. I remember sitting at my desk that afternoon, looking at Figma, and feeling the room get quieter than it was. My space heater was clicking. There was rain on the window, the fine Portland kind that isn't really falling so much as hovering. I thought about it for maybe 2 minutes, and then adjusted the code and kept working. Clients ask for hex codes off Pinterest. It doesn't have to mean anything. The third signal was the document templates. He asked for the policy PDF layout to be built on a grid I recognized. I recognized it because I'd done a contract for a partner firm 2 years ago and been given the giant's actual internal template as a reference for what to avoid. The margins, the way the footer wrapped, the position of the disclosure text on page 1. It wasn't a coincidence, and this time I couldn't tell myself it was. I sat with that for a day. Then I did what I probably should have done in week 1. I pulled every deliverable I'd made and put it next to the giant's public brand assets in a single Figma page, side by side. Word mark, color, type pairing, document grid, icon style. Even the tone of voice guide he'd approved read like a paraphrase of theirs. None of it was a copy. All of it was near. If you put my logo next to their logo, a lawyer would have a case. If you put my logo next to any other insurance company's logo, they'd look like cousins. That was the trick. He wasn't asking me to counterfeit. He was asking me to build something that would sit in a customer's peripheral vision and feel like the real thing until the moment they'd already signed. The fourth thing was smaller, and I almost missed it. In the pitch deck, he wanted a slide about trusted since, and he'd written a year that predated the LLC filing by 12. I asked about that in a review call. He said, "Placeholder, we'll get you the real date." His voice didn't change. He didn't laugh it off, didn't over-explain, just moved to the next slide. That was the moment. I finished the call, closed the laptop, and walked down to the coffee place on Clinton. It was maybe 40 degrees, gray, the kind of Portland afternoon where the light doesn't really do anything. It just sort of exists. I ordered a drip, stood outside with it, and thought about the math. 18,000 was 2 months of runway. He'd already paid 9. If I finished the job, I'd have the second half by mid-December, and I could stop staring at the dog groomer's file for a while. If I finished the job, I'd have my name on a style guide that was going to be used to sell fake insurance policies to real people, or to trick real partners into wiring money to the wrong account, or something else I couldn't fully picture, but could feel the shape of. I don't know insurance fraud well. I know branding. And I know when branding is being weaponized. I went home and wrote the email that night, kept it short, said I appreciated the collaboration, and the direction was strong, but I wasn't comfortable with the accumulated resemblance to a specific existing brand across wordmark, color, layout, and voice. Said the risk to him and to me was too high. Offered, and I meant this, to rebuild the identity in the same conservative fintech direction he wanted, without the specific references. No change to timeline, no change to price. I could ship it by the same date. He answered inside of 10 minutes, polite, almost warm, said he understood, appreciated my caution, but that the visual positioning is core to our go-to-market, and he'd need to find a partner who could execute the original brief. Asked me to send the working files for what was already approved. I said I couldn't do that either, given the concerns I'd just raised, and I'd refund the portion that covered undelivered work, 9,000 minus hours logged, roughly. He said keep it, called it a kill fee, wished me luck. I sat there staring at the reply. Part of me had wanted him to argue, to push, to confirm what I already knew by getting angry. He didn't. He was a professional, and he moved on to the next contractor the same way you'd move on to the next plumber who couldn't come Tuesday. I refunded the 9,000 anyway, didn't want it in my account. For about a week I did nothing, finished the dog groomer's file, told my landlord I might be late on December, checked the Northline guarantee domain a few times. Nothing changed. The LLC was still active. Grant's LinkedIn didn't move. Then, on a Sunday, I wrote the second email. Not to him, to the giant. I'd found the right inbox on their site, brand protection or something similar, and I kept it factual. Said I was a freelance designer in Oregon. Said I'd been contracted by an entity operating under a specific name, filed in a specific state, with a specific domain, to produce a visual identity that accumulated resemblance to theirs across the following elements. Listed them, didn't attach files. Said I'd declined the work and had no ongoing relationship with the client, and I wasn't asking for anything, but I thought they should know the entity existed and had a visual direction planned. I got an auto reply. Case number, thank you for your submission. That was it. I didn't follow up, didn't Google Grant, didn't check the domain again. I don't know what happened after. Maybe he found a designer in Eastern Europe who didn't ask questions and shipped in a week. Maybe the giant's lawyers moved and shut the domain down before anything went live. Maybe none of it was what I thought it was, and he was just a guy with derivative taste. And somewhere there's a version of me that took the second half and never noticed. What I keep coming back to isn't the money or the emails. It's how good he was on the calls, how reasonable every individual request sounded in the moment. If he'd asked me on day one to copy the Giants logo, I would have walked away in an hour. Instead, he asked me for 20 small things over 6 weeks, and every one of them, taken alone, was the kind of note a real client gives. I said yes to most of them before I understood what I was building. The contract came in through our business development team in early April. And by the second week of May, I was 3 steps into a 5-step synthesis for a company I had never heard of before. That part wasn't unusual. Our lab took on maybe 20 of these a year. Small agrochem outfits, veterinary startups, a couple of cosmetics people once, all wanting a piece of custom chemistry they couldn't do in-house. We had the fume hoods, the analytical stack, and the ISO paperwork, so they paid us to run the reactions and hand back a certificate of analysis and a jar with a label on it. This one looked like all the others on paper. Company called something like Agraverd Solutions, Delaware LLC, a tech spec written in the exact right tone, all the right words about crop protection and pre-emergent activity. They wanted 200 grams of an intermediate, told us the downstream use was proprietary, and paid the deposit inside 48 hours. That last part matters. Nobody in agrochem pays inside 48 hours. Big Ag will drag a PO out for 8 weeks and then argue about the invoice. These people paid before I had even ordered starting material. I mentioned it to Priya, our project manager, on the walk back from the coffee cart. Sorrento Valley in May is that specific kind of dry. Everything smells faintly like eucalyptus and hot asphalt, and she was squinting at her phone. "They're motivated," she said. "Don't jinx it." So I didn't jinx it. I set up the first 2 steps in the West Bay, ran them clean, got numbers off the LC that were honestly better than I expected. Devin, from the analytical group, ran the NMR for me because our own spectrometer had a bad shim that week, and he stuck the printout on my bench with a sticky note that just said, "Nice." That's the closest thing to a compliment you get from Devin. The third step was where I started to slow down. It wasn't the chemistry. The chemistry was fine. Standard reductive amination, the kind of thing an undergrad could run if you watched them. It was the target. On paper, the intermediate had a benzylate ester core and a bulky amine substituent, and by the time I was staring at the structure on my whiteboard for the 4th day in a row, something about it was bothering me the way a song you can't place bothers you. I told Priya I wanted to look into the downstream applications a little more before I signed off on the batch record. She said fine, as long as it didn't push the delivery date. I stayed late that Thursday. I remember because the cleaning crew came through at 9 and I was still in my chair, and the guy waved at me through the glass and I waved back. I started with the structure. I drew it out on a fresh page, then searched for close analogs in the open literature. Not the intermediate itself, that came up dry, but the general scaffold. The scaffold walked me straight into a group of compounds I had learned about exactly once, in a graduate seminar, from a professor who taught a unit on the history of chemical warfare, because he thought chemists should know what our field had done. I'm not going to name the class here. Anyone in the field will know what I mean when I say it was in the family of glycolate anticholinergics, developed in the 50s and 60s as incapacitants. Not lethal, at least not by design. The dose-response curve is famously nasty, though, and the psychological effects are the whole point. Militaries stopped stockpiling most of them decades ago. They still show up in the literature as things you are supposed to be able to detect, not make. I sat there for a long time. The lab at night has this quality where the fume hood sashes hum a little differently than during the day, because half the building's air handling drops back on a schedule. It's not scary, it's just noticeable when you're the only one there. I told myself I was jumping. Reductive aminations onto a benzylate core have plenty of legitimate uses. Muscarinic ligands for research, tool compounds for pharma. The intermediate wasn't the final product. The final product could still be anything. Then I looked up the company. Agraverd Solutions had a website that was 3 pages long, a stock photo of a wheat field, and about us that read like it had been generated from a template, and a Delaware registered agent that I recognized because I had once tried to sue a landlord who used the same one. No LinkedIn presence for any employee, no press releases, no trade show listings. The registration date on the corporate filing was February of that year, 3 months old. The billing address they had given us matched a virtual office suite in Sheridan, Wyoming. I know virtual office suites when I see them because my brother-in-law works in commercial real estate and complains about them. I closed the laptop and sat with my hands in my lap for a while. I want to be honest about how I felt in that moment. because people expect it to be dramatic, and it wasn't. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. I felt very tired, and I felt stupid, and I felt like I wanted to be absolutely sure before I did anything, because in our world, you don't accuse people of things without receipts. I went home around 11. My wife was asleep. I stood in the kitchen and thought about what I was going to write in the morning. Friday, I came in early. I did not touch the flask sitting in the West Bay. I wrote a memo. It was 4 pages long, single-spaced, and I made myself write it like a scientific document because I did not trust my own instincts, and I wanted the paper to be able to defend itself if anyone said I was overreacting. I laid out the structural analysis. I laid out the literature. I laid out the corporate red flags. I did not use the word weapon until the 3rd page, and when I did, I put it in a specific technical context, and I cited sources. Then I printed it, put it in a folder, walked down to the 2nd floor, and asked the director's assistant if he was free for 15 minutes. The director's name was Alan. Older guy, PhD out of Scripps, ran the place for 11 years. Reasonable man. I had known him well enough to say hi in the hall, but not much more than that. He read the memo in front of me. He didn't say anything while he read. He got to the 3rd page, went back to the 2nd, then flipped to the front and started again. Then he set it down on his desk and put both hands flat on top of it, one over the other, like he was keeping it from blowing away. "When did you draw this connection?" he asked. "Last night, around 8. Anyone else know?" "No, I wanted to bring it to you first." He nodded. He asked me to walk him through the structural argument out loud, and I did. He was calm the whole time. That part I remember most clearly. He was so calm that I started to wonder if I had gotten it wrong. Then he picked up his desk phone and called our general counsel and told her to come upstairs, now, and canceled his 11 o'clock. The contract was terminated the next day, not paused. Terminated, in writing, citing a clause about material misrepresentation of end use. The deposit was placed in escrow pending resolution. Nobody from Agriverdi ever replied to the notice. Nobody ever called. The email address on the contract bounced within 2 weeks. The intermediate, all of it, both the material I had made and the starting material on hand, was destroyed under our controlled substance protocol, which technically didn't apply, but Alan wanted it documented and witnessed and gone. The lab filed a report with the FBI on our own initiative. That took a while, because it turns out there is no obvious phone number for, "We might have almost made part of a chemical weapon, please advise." And we ended up going through a contact of Alan's who used to work in federal enforcement. 2 agents came out. They were polite. They spent most of a day with me and with Priya and took copies of everything. And I signed a statement, and they thanked us for coming forward. They also told us, in the same even tone, that the Sheridan address was a mail drop with 200 other companies added, that the wire had come through a correspondent bank in a jurisdiction that doesn't cooperate, and that the person listed as the sole officer of the LLC had used a stolen identity belonging to a retired truck driver in Michigan who had been dead since 2019. I asked if they were going to find anyone. One of them, the older one, said, "We'll try." He didn't say it like he believed it. That was the end of my involvement. Life at the lab went back to normal. Priya screens contracts differently now. There's a whole new checklist. Devin still leaves sticky notes on my bench. Sometimes he leaves them on batches I have not yet started, which is his idea of a joke. I don't lose sleep over it. What bothers me, when it bothers me, is not the chemistry, and not the shell company, and not the money. It's that whoever sent that spec sheet had read our capability page carefully enough to write it in our voice. They knew what we would say yes to. They picked us on purpose. They are still out there, and they are picking someone else right now, and that someone else might not have stayed late on a Thursday. That's it for today's episode, everyone. Let me know in the comments which story felt the most unsettling, and support the channel if you want more. We return to 4chan because behind some of those posts are situations that sound almost too normal at first. And that's exactly what makes them hard to shake. Sleep easy if you can, and I'll see you next time.